Lightning was once the weapon of an angry god. Every rumble of thunder and churn of the sea was a message from a world our ancestors could not yet explain with science, so they explained it with story. This video uncovers the true origins of 30 legendary beasts, from the fire-breathing dragon to the sea-swallowing kraken, each born from a simple misunderstanding of the natural world. You will discover how dinosaur bones created monsters and how the wind itself was given a voice. Why did cultures across the globe imagine such similar creatures? And what can these ancient stories teach us about our own relationship with the unknown? Are you ready to learn the secret history hidden inside the world's greatest myths? A world without explanation is a terrifying place. Picture the earliest human communities, their lives utterly dependent on the land and the sky. A sudden drought could mean starvation. A flash flood could wipe out a home in an instant. The ground itself might tremble and split without warning. For them, these were not impersonal weather patterns or geological processes. They were deliberate actions. Someone or something was causing them. This fundamental need to answer the question why is the very cradle of mythology. When the wind howled, it wasn't just air moving, it was a spirit expressing its mood. When a volcano erupted, it wasn't just tectonic activity, it was a giant stirring beneath the mountain. This process of giving human-like traits to natural forces, called anthropomorphism, was a profound coping mechanism. It transformed a chaotic, indifferent universe into a world that could be understood, and more importantly, a world that could be negotiated with. You could offer a gift to the spirit of the river to calm its waters. You could sing a song to please the sky god and bring the rain. These stories were humanity's first operating system for reality, a way to impose order on the overwhelming unknown. They were not just tales, they were theories. This deep-seated desire to find a face in the storm and a will in the wildfire is what breathed life into the very first legendary creatures, setting a pattern of storytelling that would echo across continents for thousands of years. That rhythmic pounding from a sea cave was not just noise, it was the pulse of a sleeping titan. This instinct to find a living presence in nature's phenomena is the very engine of myth. Our ancestors were master pattern seekers, and when they witnessed a powerful, repeating event, their most logical conclusion was that a conscious being was causing it. This is the framework of misinterpretation, a universal human lens that transformed simple geology into legendary architecture. A collection of strangely shaped boulders was not a random formation, but the collapsed temple of a forgotten race. The vast circular imprint of a dried-up lake might be seen as the footprint of a god who once stepped upon the earth. They were not being foolish, they were using the best tools they had, observation and reason, to decode a world filled with wonders and dangers. Every strange bone unearthed from the soil was tangible evidence. A mammoth skull with its single, large nasal cavity looked unmistakably like the remains of a one-eyed giant. The long, curved ribs of a dinosaur could easily be reassembled in the mind as the wings of a dragon. These were not wild fantasies, they were forensics, an attempt to reconstruct the creatures that clearly once shared their world. This process of assigning a face to the storm and a will to the wildfire was a profound step in human understanding. It created a world that could be spoken to, a universe that could be reasoned with, even if its rulers were tempestuous gods and restless monsters. By recognizing this logic, we begin to see the ancient myths not as simple stories, but as the world's first great theories of everything. The ground itself seemed to offer proof of these ancient titans. Across the European countryside, the plow of a farmer would occasionally strike against something impossibly large and stony buried in the earth. These were not the bones of any boar or bear they knew. They were colossal, strange, and often resembled the skeletons of immense serpents or lizards. Without the concept of extinction or deep time, the only logical conclusion was a terrifying one. These were the remains of creatures that clearly still lived somewhere in the remote, uncharted corners of the world. But what kind of beast could produce such bones? The answer was waiting in the Earth's most volatile regions. In mountainous areas, early people encountered fissures in the rock that breathed out heat and foul-smelling gases, sometimes even bursting into jets of flame. Here was the source of the creature's legendary breath. The fossil evidence gave the dragon its form, a massive, reptilian body, while the volcanic vents gave it its defining weapon, a fiery exhalation that could scorch the land. This fusion of paleontology and geology created a monster that was perfectly adapted to its symbolic role. It became the ultimate embodiment of the dangerous wilderness, a hoarder of gold and a threat to kingdoms. To slay a dragon was not just to kill a beast, it was to tame the chaotic, untamable forces of nature itself. This creature was a story crafted from the very landscape, a warning and a challenge written in bone and fire. That same primal logic of finding a living will within nature's violence echoes across the Pacific. In the sudden, blinding fury of a Japanese lightning storm, people did not see an impersonal discharge of energy. They saw a living weapon. The crack of thunder and the split-second flash were the roar and pounce of the Raiju, a creature literally woven from the storm's own power. This was not a god throwing a spear from the clouds, but something far more intimate and terrifying. The lightning bolt was the beast itself, a being of pure, chaotic energy given a form people could recognize. It was most often imagined as a wolf or a weasel, animals known for their swift, ferocious attacks. When a bolt struck a tall tree, splintering the ancient wood into kindling, that was not a random event. It was the Raiju landing, its celestial claws tearing into the earth. The deep grooves left in the soil were not erosion, but the marks of its passage. This interpretation transformed the abstract, terrifying randomness of a lightning strike into something understandable. It was no longer a senseless act of nature that could strike anyone, anywhere. It was the targeted, albeit chaotic, assault of a specific, animalistic being. The danger now had a face, a shape, and a behavior. You could not predict the Raiju, but you could understand its motives, because they were the motives of a wild animal, driven by instinct and a storm's own unpredictable rage. Even the bones of giants could be misunderstood. The formidable Cyclops of Greek legend, a one-eyed menace immortalized in Homer's Odyssey, did not emerge from a poet's dream alone. Its terrifying form was pieced together from tangible evidence found in the very earth. Across the Mediterranean islands, ancient Greeks would uncover enormous, strangely shaped skulls buried in the ground. These were not the remains of any known beast. The most striking feature was a single, cavernous opening in the center of the face, a void that seemed to stare back from a forgotten age. Without a context for creatures that no longer walked the earth, the most logical conclusion was a terrifying one. They were looking at the skull of a giant, a being so immense it could only be a monster from the old stories. That large, central cavity, which we now know housed the trunk of a prehistoric dwarf elephant, was perfectly misinterpreted as a single, massive eye socket. This single piece of fossil evidence was enough to build an entire legend. A race of one-eyed giants, the Cyclops, were born from this simple anatomical error. The story provided a perfect explanation for the unexplainable. Who else but a monstrous giant could have left behind such colossal bones? This was not carelessness. It was a form of early detective work, using the best available clues to reconstruct a creature that must have once roamed their world. The myth of the Cyclops stands as a powerful testament to how a single, honest mistake, carved in stone and bone, can echo for thousands of years, shaping our deepest fears and our most epic tales. Yet the sea held its own colossal secrets, waiting in the crushing darkness of the deep. For Scandinavian sailors navigating the frigid North Atlantic, the ocean was a realm of absolute mystery and terror. Its most inexplicable events demanded a monstrous explanation. When a calm sea would suddenly begin to churn, forming a vortex powerful enough to pull a wooden ship into the abyss, this was no mere whirlpool. To the men on deck, it was the surfacing of the Kraken, a living island of flesh rising from the depths. The swirling water was not water at all, but the beast itself, stirring the ocean into a frenzy. This interpretation was given terrifying, tangible form by rare encounters with the giant squid. A long, pale arm breaking the surface, or the glimpse of a massive eye in the waves, became the limbs and the gaze of the legendary monster. In the minds of these mariners, the two separate phenomena fused into a single, unified threat. The whirlpool was the Kraken's emergence, and the squid's tentacles were the very instruments it used to ensnare its prey. The myth served as the ultimate maritime warning. It gave a recognizable face to the ocean's most unpredictable and deadly nature, transforming a random act of hydraulic physics into the deliberate attack of a conscious being. This story was their map of the unknown, charting the places where the water itself could come alive with a hungry, ancient will. High above the plains, the storm clouds did not simply roll in, they arrived on the wings of a legend. For numerous Native American cultures, the sky itself was a canvas for the Thunderbird, a being of such immense scale that its wingspan could blot out the sun. The low, rolling rumble that preceded a downpour was not an impersonal sound. It was the rhythmic flapping of its celestial feathers. Each brilliant, jagged fork of lightning was explained as a purposeful act, a flash from the creature's piercing eyes or the gleam of the serpents it sometimes carried in its talons. This was not a monster to be slain, but a powerful spirit to be respected. The Thunderbird embodied the beautiful and terrifying duality of nature itself. It could bring the life-giving rains that nourished the crops and filled the rivers, a clear act of benevolence. Yet that same power could unleash devastating winds and floods, a reminder of its awesome and unforgiving strength. By envisioning the storm as this great bird, these cultures transformed a complex meteorological event into a relationship. The weather was no longer a random occurrence, but the deliberate action of a conscious being. This understanding opened a path for communication. Through ceremony and respect, communities believed they could appeal to the Thunderbird, encouraging the gentle rains and asking for protection from its more destructive aspects. It was a way to find harmony with a force that was ultimately beyond human control, giving a face and a purpose to the vast, unpredictable sky. A treacherous glow could flicker to life in the darkest marshes, a phantom flame that seemed to beckon with a silent, dancing finger. This was the Will-o'-the-Wisp, a spectral lantern carried by a mischievous spirit intent on leading the weary and the lost from the safe path into the waiting clutches of the bog. For any traveler caught in the foggy lowlands of the British Isles or Europe, that elusive light was not a simple chemical reaction. It was a conscious trick, a malevolent game played by the unseen inhabitants of the wetlands. The ground itself was conspiring against them, and this ghostly light was its deceitful signal. The science behind the phenomenon is one of natural decay. As plant matter breaks down in the oxygen-poor water of a swamp, it releases methane gas. When this gas meets the air, it can ignite spontaneously, creating those fleeting, ethereal flames that hover and vanish just out of reach. But our ancestors saw purpose in that dance. The light moved, therefore it was alive. It retreated when approached, therefore it was intelligent. It led people into peril, therefore its intentions were malign. This myth was far more than a campfire tale. It was a brilliant, culturally coded survival guide. By giving the dangerous marsh a face and a name, the story embedded a vital rule deep within the community's memory. Do not follow the strange lights, stay on the solid path. The story of the Will-o'-the-Wisp transformed an abstract geological hazard into a memorable character, a supernatural enforcer that taught every generation to respect the hidden dangers of the land. A river does not simply flow, it carves the destiny of a civilization. In the rich, fertile valleys of ancient China, the most vital force was not a beast to be slain, but a spirit to be honored. The Chinese dragon, or long, stands in stark contrast to the destructive dragons of the West. This was no fire-breathing monster hoarding treasure, but a benevolent celestial being, a master of rivers and rain. Its very form was a map of the landscape it governed. The dragon's long, serpentine body, undulating through artistic depictions for thousands of years, is a direct echo of the winding, meandering paths of the Yellow River and the Yangtze. These rivers were the absolute lifeblood of society, providing water for drinking, for transportation, and most importantly, for the rice paddies that fed the nation. The dragon did not live in the river, the dragon was the river, its conscious will made manifest in the flow of water. This connection extended skyward. The dragon's power was its command over the weather, specifically the life-giving monsoon rains. The arrival of the seasonal downpours was not a random act of nature. It was the dragon providing its blessing, ensuring the rice would grow and the people would thrive. But this relationship was a delicate balance. A prolonged drought was not a simple lack of rain. It was a sign that the dragon had become displeased, perhaps due to some failing within the community. A devastating flood was not just an overflow of water, it was the direct expression of the dragon's anger, its power unleashed in a destructive torrent. The Chinese dragon, therefore, was the ultimate personification of the entire water cycle. From the flowing river on the ground to the gathering rain clouds in the sky, it was all the work of a single, intelligent, divine force. This interpretation created a world where humans lived in a constant, negotiated relationship with the environment. Emperors were seen as the sons of the dragon, their right to rule dependent on maintaining this cosmic harmony. Through rituals, offerings, and respect, the people sought to honor this powerful spirit, ensuring the rivers remained full and the rains arrived on time. The dragon was not a monster from the wilderness, but the very heartbeat of civilization itself, a reminder that survival depended on understanding and appeasing the magnificent, untamable forces of the natural world. Even the solid ground beneath our feet could betray a hidden life of its own. When the earth began to rumble and shake without warning, splitting roads and toppling homes, it felt less like a geological process and more like the stirrings of a slumbering giant. This profound need to find a living cause for such violence gave rise to a powerful idea found across the globe. The concept of a colossal being whose very movements were the source of the world's tremors. In some strands of Jewish folklore, this idea intertwines with the legend of the golem, a massive figure painstakingly sculpted from clay and earth. While often a guardian of its people, the underlying image of such a being provides a startlingly clear explanation for an earthquake's chaos. The deep, groaning roar that preceded the shaking could be heard as the heavy footfalls of this earthen titan. Each violent tremor was the result of its immense limbs shifting, and the great fissures that opened in the soil were the scars left by its overwhelming strength. This was not a random, senseless disaster, but the deliberate, if clumsy, motion of a tangible entity. By giving the earthquake a body and a will, however monstrous, our ancestors transformed an act of pure geologic force into a story they could process. The ground was not merely breaking, it was being moved by something, and if something can be moved, perhaps it can also, one day, be calmed. This personification offered a fragile kind of comprehension in the face of nature's most unpredictable fury, turning the terror of a shaking world into the footsteps of a creature from the deepest layers of myth. A sudden spiral of dust would rise from an open field, dancing with a life all its own. For Slavic communities, this was no random gust of wind. It was the visible whirl of a Vila, a spirit of breathtaking beauty and untamed wildness. These beings were not gods to be worshipped, but forces of nature to be respected and often feared. They were said to inhabit the liminal spaces, the deep forests and high mountain meadows, and their arrival was heralded by these spinning vortices of air and dust. To see a whirlwind was to know the Vila were dancing, their movements both graceful and dangerously unpredictable. The very nature of a dust devil, appearing without warning and vanishing just as quickly, perfectly mirrored the capricious personality of these spirits. One moment they could offer guidance or a blessing to a lost traveler, and the next they might curse someone who dared to interrupt their revelry or show them disrespect. The myth served as a vivid cultural warning. It taught people to read the landscape for signs of the unseen, and to understand that some parts of the natural world were not meant for human intrusion. That localized spinning column of air became a story about boundaries, reminding everyone that the wilderness held its own ancient, powerful inhabitants whose whims were as changeable as the wind itself. Deep within the still waters of an Australian billabong, a strange and mournful cry would shatter the night. For the Aboriginal peoples, this was not the call of any ordinary animal. It was the voice of the Bunyip, a haunting presence lurking in the depths. The vast, ancient landscape of Australia was filled with sounds that were unfamiliar to European settlers, but for the indigenous communities who knew the land intimately, the Bunyip's roar represented something more profound than simple fear. It was the sound of the unknown itself, given form. The origin of this legend is a masterclass in auditory illusion. The Australian bittern, a secretive marsh bird, produces a deep, booming call that can carry for great distances across water. At night, this resonant sound, combined with the distinctive grunts and growls of possums or even the distant roar of a crocodile, would blend and warp as it echoed across a still waterhole. The water itself acted as a natural amplifier, twisting these separate, identifiable noises into a single, unearthly bellow that seemed to rise from the mud below. This was not a story born of ignorance, but one born of keen observation. The myth served as a vital ecological and spiritual guide. A billabong that was home to a bunyip was a place of power and danger, a reminder to approach certain parts of the wilderness with caution and respect. The creature's unsettling cry mapped the boundaries between the known world and the deep, ancestral mysteries of the land, teaching every generation to listen carefully to the stories the night itself was trying to tell. The sun itself could be swallowed whole by the void. In the heart of ancient Egypt, where the sun god Ra was the absolute source of life, a solar eclipse was a moment of profound cosmic terror. The world plunged into an unnerving twilight, the air grew cold, and the brilliant disk of the sun was steadily extinguished by a creeping, black shadow. This was not a simple cloud passing, it was the death of the day itself. From this collective fear and awe, a legend of magnificent renewal took flight, the story of the phoenix. The great bird, cloaked in fiery plumage, was the sun given a living form. Its daily journey across the sky was its life, and its descent below the horizon each evening was its death. But the true spectacle, the ultimate proof of its immortality, was the eclipse. The moment the sun vanished completely was the phoenix's spectacular death in a burst of cosmic flame. And then, as the black shadow began to retreat and the first sliver of light reappeared, that was the miracle. That was the moment a new, young phoenix rose from the glowing embers of the old. This myth was a profound act of psychological alchemy. It transformed a terrifying celestial omen into a guaranteed promise. The eclipse was no longer an ending, but a necessary part of a divine cycle. It was the universe's way of demonstrating that even the greatest lights must occasionally be renewed, that from the ashes of the old, the new must always, always rise. This story offered more than just an explanation. It offered comfort, assuring every generation that the sun's return was not just a hope, but a celestial certainty written in fire and feather. Deep within the earth, the silence is never truly silent. For those who dared to venture into the labyrinthine cave systems of southern Africa, the darkness was filled with unsettling whispers. A low, constant rumble echoed through the stone corridors, a sound that seemed to vibrate up through the soles of the feet. The walls themselves appeared to be carved by some immense, winding force, with smooth, tubular passages that defied simple explanation. In this realm of absolute shadow, the human mind sought a creator for such grandeur and such strange, resonant noise. The answer took the form of the Grootslang, the great snake. This was no ordinary serpent, but a primordial being of unimaginable size and age, believed to have been present at the very dawn of the world. The rumbling was not just water, it was the Grootslang's deep, guttural breath. Those vast, winding tunnels were not carved by water over millennia, but by the colossal body of the snake itself, pushing and grinding its way through the living rock to create its legendary lair. The creature became the ultimate guardian of the Earth's deepest secrets. These caves were often sources of vital water and, in some tales, of priceless diamonds. The Grootslang was said to hoard these glittering treasures, making the subterranean world a place of both potential wealth and unimaginable danger. To enter its domain was to risk becoming prey to an ancient intelligence that viewed the entire underground as its sovereign territory. This myth served a profound dual purpose. It perfectly explained the alien geology of extensive cave systems, and it enforced a crucial cultural respect for these dangerous, yet essential, places. The story taught that the earth was not just dirt and stone, but a living body with its own hidden heart, and that some chambers within it were never meant for human eyes. The boundary between land and sea was not always a hard line. Along the wind-swept coasts of Scotland and Ireland, the Atlantic delivered its own kind of mystery in the form of the seal. Their presence was a constant, hauntingly familiar echo of something more. With their large, liquid eyes that seemed to hold a deep and knowing intelligence, and their curious habit of watching human activity from just beyond the waves, they appeared less like animals and more like distant cousins from a watery realm. This sense of kinship was amplified by their behavior on land. A seal hauled out on a sun-warmed rock, its body arranged in a languid, almost human repose, could easily be mistaken from a distance for a person resting by the shore. It was from these simple, powerful observations that the legend of the Selkie was born. The discovery of a discarded seal skin on the beach was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. To an imaginative mind, this was not just a molted pelt, it was a garment. It was the proof that these creatures could shed their aquatic form and walk among us as men and women of startling beauty. The myth provided a poignant explanation for the seal's captivating presence. They were not merely animals, they were shape-shifters, beings with one life in the deep ocean and another, secret life on the land. Their mournful cries carried on the sea wind were not just animal calls, but the lonely songs of those yearning for a home they had lost or a love they had left behind. This story did more than just explain animal behavior. It wove a thread of connection between the human heart and the wild, untamable soul of the sea itself. The monsoon arrives in India not as a gentle rain, but as a declaration of power. For the cultures that flourished along the mighty Ganges River, this annual deluge was the source of all life and a bringer of potential ruin. To give this immense dualistic force a tangible form, Hindu mythology created the Makara. This is no single animal, but a magnificent hybrid, a creature pieced together from the very elements of the water's domain. Its body might be that of a crocodile, a master of the river's depths, while its head carries the trunk and strength of an elephant, an animal intimately linked with rain clouds and forest pools. Its tail could be that of a fish, completing its sovereignty over every aquatic realm. This composite form was a stroke of symbolic genius, perfectly capturing the many faces of water itself. In one season, the rivers would swell with nourishing water, filling the rice paddies and ensuring a harvest. This was the Makara as a benevolent vehicle, carrying the goddess Ganga and her gifts of fertility to the people. But when the rains were too fierce, the same river would transform into a devastating flood, sweeping away entire villages in a torrent of mud and debris. This was the Makara in its other aspect, a chaotic and destructive beast whose crocodile jaws could crush and whose elephantine force could trample all in its path. The creature was a walking, breathing lesson in respect. It taught that the same natural force that granted life could also take it away, and that survival depended on understanding and honoring this essential, untamable duality. The Makara was not a monster to be slain, but a profound symbol of the delicate balance upon which civilization was built, a reminder that the source of all sustenance could, in a moment, become an overwhelming power beyond any human control. A single shadow could blot out the sun for miles. For desert travelers and sailors navigating the vast emptiness of the sea, the sudden appearance of a colossal, moving darkness was not merely a passing weather event. It was the silhouette of the roc, the legendary bird of Arabian mythology whose wingspan was said to be measured not in feet, but in the distance between horizons. The tales of Sinbad the sailor, where this creature could snatch an elephant from the ground as easily as an eagle takes a rabbit, were not born from pure fantasy. They were born from a fundamental misjudgment of scale in a world without reference points. High above, a large bird of prey, like an eagle or a vulture, might indeed be seen carrying a small lamb or a young goat. From the immense distance to the ground, the bird itself would be a mere speck, but its shadow cast upon the earth would be magnified into a monstrous, undulating shape. This shadow, when combined with the sight of a real bird carrying real prey, created a perfect storm of misinterpretation. The small animal in its talons became an elephant in the telling, and the vast, bird-like shadow became the creature itself. The myth of the roc is a profound lesson in perspective. It reveals how our ancestors used the clues available to them to make sense of a world filled with immense, awe-inspiring phenomena. They saw a shape that moved with purpose and possessed a familiar form, and their minds, striving for understanding, filled in the terrifying, magnificent details. That same deceptive call was heard in the windswept straits of the ancient Mediterranean. For Greek sailors navigating treacherous channels, the most perilous threat was not always a visible monster, but a sound, a haunting melody that seemed to drift across the waves from a barren shore. This was the song of the Sirens. Their voices were said to be so exquisitely beautiful that no man could resist them, compelling sailors to steer their ships directly toward the source of the music and onto the jagged rocks that lay in wait just beneath the water's surface. The myth is a masterful interpretation of a genuine coastal phenomenon. In specific locations where the wind is forced through narrow fissures in cliff faces or into the mouths of sea caves, it does not simply howl. It can produce a sustained, whistling note, a naturally occurring music that swells and fades with the gusts. To a crew already strained by a long journey, their minds filled with stories and their ears filled with the constant noise of the sea, this sound could easily be misinterpreted as a distant, harmonic chorus. The visual scene completed the deadly illusion. A rugged, inaccessible coastline where the waves crashed with explosive force against hidden stone created a perfect contrast. The beautiful, unearthly music promised paradise, while the churning water and sharp rocks delivered a brutal end. The Sirens, therefore, were the perfect personification of the sea's ultimate deceit, its ability to present a surface of serene beauty while hiding a heart of pure danger. The story was a powerful warning etched into the culture of seafaring. It taught that the most alluring temptations could be the most deadly, and that survival often depended on resisting the seductive call of the unknown, no matter how beautiful it may sound. The world itself was held in a serpent's crushing embrace. For the Norse people, whose lives were defined by the treacherous expanse of the North Atlantic, the sea was not merely a body of water, but a living boundary to existence. This was the domain of Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, a being of such impossible scale that it wrapped its scaled body around the entire sphere of the world, its tail clamped firmly in its own jaws. This powerful image of a serpent eating itself was not born from a dream of chaos, but from a profound observation of the natural world. The great ocean currents, like the North Atlantic Drift, flow in vast, continuous loops, creating a river within the sea that has no true beginning and no discernible end. To a people navigating by the stars and the feel of the waves, this endless, circular flow was the very motion of the serpent's coiling body. The ocean was not just water, it was a single, conscious entity, and Jörmungandr was its name. This creature's legendary battles with the thunder god Thor are among the most iconic in mythology. When Thor fishes for the serpent, the struggle is not just between a god and a monster. It is the ultimate depiction of humanity's fragile struggle against the overwhelming, untamable sea. Each thunderstorm over the water, with its crashing waves and howling winds, could be interpreted as another clash between these cosmic forces. The myth gave the Norse a framework for understanding their place in a world surrounded by an aquatic titan. It was a story that acknowledged both the sea's life-giving bounty and its world-ending potential, a constant reminder that their entire civilization was built on the shore of a sleeping giant. Even our modern world is not immune to the birth of new monsters from old fears. In the late 1990s, a chilling legend began to circulate through rural communities in Puerto Rico and later Mexico. Farmers would find their livestock, goats and chickens, lying dead in the fields, their bodies bearing strange, small wounds and seemingly drained of blood. The precision of the attacks felt unnatural, too clinical for a common predator. The local name for the culprit spread like wildfire: El Chupacabra, the goat sucker. This was not a creature from an ancient text, but a modern phantom born from the eerie crime scenes left behind in the barnyard. The terror was amplified by the occasional sighting of the beast itself, often described as a hairless, dog-like animal with spines along its back and large, piercing eyes. Yet this terrifying form has a perfectly natural, albeit unfortunate, explanation. The most likely candidate for the original Chupacabra is a wild dog or coyote suffering from a severe case of mange. This parasitic skin condition causes intense itching and hair loss, transforming a familiar canine into a gaunt, leathery-skinned creature that looks nothing like its healthy counterparts. Its unnatural appearance, combined with its desperate, predatory behavior, created the perfect visual for a new kind of monster. The mystery of the blood draining was another case of misinterpretation. When a predator like a coyote attacks, it often goes for the neck, targeting major blood vessels. If the animal is startled or interrupted, it may flee before consuming its kill, leaving behind a carcass that appears to have been bled with a purpose. The Chupacabra myth demonstrates a profound truth about human psychology. Our need to find a cause for the unexplained is so powerful that it can transform a sick animal and a half-eaten goat into a legendary beast, proving that the engine of myth-making is still very much alive, fueled by the shadows at the edge of our own well-lit world. The desert wind does not whisper, it screams. In the vast, empty stretches of ancient Persia, this sound was not a simple weather event, but the voice of a predator. The Manticore was born from this relentless auditory assault, a creature designed by the human mind to explain the unexplainable noises of the wilderness. Its form was a terrifying fusion, a lion's body for power, a man's face for cruel intelligence, and that infamous tail, a weapon that launched a volley of deadly spines. But where would such a beast find its ammunition? The desert itself provided the answer. During a sudden sandstorm, the air itself turns into a weapon. Fine, stinging grit and sharp, wind-blown gravel pepper, anyone caught in the open, feeling less like random debris and more like a targeted assault. This was the Manticore's attack, the very landscape projecting its venom. The creature's roar was a masterpiece of misinterpretation, as powerful gusts of wind funnel through narrow rock canyons and whistle over honeycombed stone, the sound distorts. It can deepen into a guttural growl one moment, then rise into a shrieking, almost human cry the next. To a lone traveler, this was not the wind. It was the hunting call of a composite beast, a single entity that combined the most frightening attributes of man and animal into one desert phantom. The Manticore was more than a monster. It was a sensory map of a dangerous environment. It taught that in the disorienting emptiness of the desert, the air could bite and the rocks could speak, personifying the entire harsh landscape into a single, unforgettable warning. A river's surface can hide a world of silent force beneath its gentle ripples. In the misty glens of Scotland, that hidden danger was given a name and a beautiful, terrible form, the Kelpie. This shape-shifting water spirit was a master of deception, most often appearing as a magnificent, lonely horse grazing by the edge of a loch or a rushing river. Its coat might glisten with an unearthly sheen, and its mane could be tangled with water weeds, a subtle clue to its true nature. To a weary traveler, the sight of such a steed might seem like a gift, a chance to cross a wide river or simply to rest a moment. But to climb upon the Kelpie's back was to seal a tragic fate. The moment a person touched it, their skin would stick fast to the creature as if fused to living glue. The beautiful horse would then reveal its monstrous purpose, charging into the deepest, coldest part of the water, dragging its captive down to drown. This chilling story was a direct and brilliant interpretation of a very real physical danger, the river's unseen undercurrent. The powerful, sucking pull that could overwhelm even the strongest swimmer was not an impersonal hydraulic force. It was the Kelpie's malevolent will, its conscious desire to claim a life. The floating patches of pondweed that sometimes gathered in swirling patterns on the surface became the creature's flowing mane in the minds of observers. A low-hanging mist creeping over a loch at dusk could easily be seen as the Kelpie's ethereal form taking shape. This myth was far more than a scary story. It was a vital, culturally coded safety lesson. By giving the river a conscious, predatory intent, the legend embedded a crucial rule deep within the community's memory. Do not trust the beautiful, lonely horse by the water. Do not be lured by a seemingly calm surface. The Kelpie taught every generation, especially children, to see the moving water not just as a resource, but as a presence with its own rules and its own potential for danger. It transformed an abstract risk of drowning into a memorable, emotional narrative, ensuring that respect for the water's deceptive power was passed down through the ages. The ice itself could speak in a language of groans and sharp reports. For the Inuit communities living along the vast, frozen coastlines of the Arctic, the shifting sea ice was a constant presence, and its sounds were both beautiful and deeply unsettling. A low, resonant moan would travel for miles underfoot, followed by a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot across the stillness. To an untrained ear, these noises could sound almost human, like distant voices or a mournful song rising from the depths. This eerie chorus was the voice of the Qalupalik, described as a human-like creature with long, tangled hair and greenish skin. It was said to live just beneath the ice shelf, perpetually waiting. Its telltale song was not just a warning of its presence, but a lure designed to draw the curious closer to the water's edge. The myth was a masterstroke of cultural safety engineering. The most treacherous ice was often found near the shore, where shifting tides and hidden currents could create thin, unstable patches that looked deceptively solid. A child chasing a stray toy or simply exploring could easily step onto one of these weak points and vanish into the freezing water in an instant. The story of the Qalupalik transformed this abstract, invisible danger into a tangible predator with a clear motive. It gave parents a powerful, memorable tool to protect their children, embedding a crucial rule into the community's collective memory: do not go near the cracking ice. Do not listen to its song. The Qalupalik was not born from malice but from profound care. It was a guardian story, a frightening yet necessary fiction that used the power of myth to enforce a boundary that meant the difference between life and loss, proving that sometimes the most important lessons are whispered on the wind, or in this case, echoed through the ice. A rider and his horse could move with a single, fluid purpose that was utterly alien to those who had never witnessed such a partnership. For the early cultures of the Mediterranean who had not yet domesticated the horse, the first sight of a mounted warrior from the northern steppes would have been a vision of impossible unity. From a distance, the line between human and animal would have blurred, creating the seamless silhouette of a single, powerful beast. The speed was unimaginable, the coordinated movement a display of raw force that defied their understanding of the natural world. How else could such a being exist, if not as a race of savage, untamed creatures born from the wilderness itself? This profound cultural shock gave rise to the centaur, a myth born not from a fear of nature, but from a fear of the unfamiliar human. The legend reflects the awe and terror inspired by a new technology, the ultimate cavalry, seen through a lens that had no context for it. The centaur's famous duality, its struggle between civilized wisdom and wild instinct, perfectly mirrors the ancient perception of these nomadic riders. They were seen as beings of great knowledge and profound barbarism, a contradiction that could only be explained by a hybrid nature. This was not a simple case of mistaken identity, but a deep, narrative processing of a world suddenly made larger and more dangerous by the arrival of a stranger on an unimaginable steed. A quiet village at night was a world of invisible threats. The darkness rustled with sounds that defied easy explanation, and the sudden illness of a loved one could feel like a targeted curse. From this potent mix of fear and mystery, the aswang took shape in Filipino folklore. This was not a single monster, but a master of deception, a shapeshifter that could appear human by day and transform into a predatory creature by night. Its described behaviors read like a field guide to the tropical night. The eerie clicking noises it was said to make are a perfect match for the calls of large geckos echoing from the jungle canopy, or the ultrasonic chatter of fruit bats navigating the darkness. The sight of a large, winged shadow passing silently over a full moon could easily be interpreted as the aswang in flight, a terrifying silhouette against the only source of light. But the creature's legend went far deeper than animal sounds. It provided a framework for understanding profound human suffering in an era before germ theory. When a mysterious illness swept through a community, taking the lives of children or causing complications during pregnancy, the randomness was unbearable. How could a healthy person simply fade away? The aswang offered an answer. It was not a random tragedy, but a deliberate, malicious act. The creature was blamed for these sudden losses, its dark magic a tangible cause for the invisible work of viruses or genetic conditions. This attribution, while frightening, created a world where such events had a reason and, theoretically, a source that could be confronted. The aswang was a composite being, woven from the very real fears of the dark and the heartbreaking mystery of disease. It gave a name and a form to the unseen dangers that haunted the perimeter of every village. transforming the chaos of nature and illness into a story that, however terrifying, could at least be understood. The water could rise without warning, swallowing meadows and pathways in a single, relentless surge. For the communities of ancient Wales, this sudden flooding was not a random act of weather, but the direct result of a disturbed temper. Deep within certain lakes lived the Afanc, a beast whose very moods dictated the level of the water. When enraged, it would thrash and struggle, its violent movements causing the lake to overflow its banks and pour into the valleys below. This legend finds its breadth not in fantasy, but in the very real, industrious work of a local engineer, the beaver. A beaver's dam is a marvel of natural construction, a barrier of mud and timber that can completely reshape a landscape, turning a quiet stream into a sprawling wetland. The sound that accompanied this transformation would have been mysterious and unsettling to an early observer. The loud, startling crack of a tree falling in the night, gnawed through by relentless teeth, could easily be attributed to a monster. The sharp, wet slap of a beaver's tail on the water's surface echoes like a warning signal, a percussive beat that travels far across a still lake, but the most direct link to the myth is the flood itself. A beaver dam, while sturdy, is not permanent. A heavy rain or a structural failure could cause it to burst, releasing a torrent of pent-up water in a catastrophic flash flood. For a village downstream, this was not a hydrological event. It was the Afanc's wrath made liquid, a deliberate punishment unleashed upon the land. The myth, therefore, was a brilliant, if fearful, recognition of a profound ecological truth. It personified the beaver's incredible ability to control water, transforming a busy animal into a legendary guardian of the lake, a creature whose peaceful slumber meant safety and whose anger meant a deluge. The jungle at night was not merely dark, it was a realm of active, unseen intelligence. From the depths of Mayan cenotes and caves emerged the Camazotz, a deity not of simple fear, but of profound, sacred terror. This was the death bat, a god whose form was pieced together from the very real and startling behaviors of the large, carnivorous bats that thrived in the region. Its sudden, silent swoop from the blackness was not random, it was a hunt. Its sharp, angular features were not just for show, they were the tools of a predator. But its most unnerving power was its ability to see without light. The constant, high-pitched clicking that filled the air as these bats navigated the absolute dark was a form of perception our ancestors could not comprehend. They heard the sounds, and they witnessed the bats moving with flawless precision around every obstacle, snatching prey from the air with impossible accuracy. The only logical conclusion was that the sounds were not just noise, they were a kind of supernatural vision. The Camazotz was using these clicks to paint a picture of the world, to see with sound itself. This ability transformed the creature from a simple animal into a sentient, malevolent force that owned the night. It became a being intimately linked with the underworld, a place of perpetual darkness where such a power would be absolute. The Camazotz personified the deep, instinctual fear of what might be watching from the shadows, a fear made real by the very real yet utterly alien biology of the bat. This story was a way to give a name and a shape to the disorienting unknown of the jungle after sunset, turning a remarkable natural adaptation into the defining trait of a divine and deadly guardian. The finality of death was measured on a set of golden scales. In the silent, torch-lit hall of judgment from Egyptian belief, the fate of a soul did not rest with a distant, unseen force, but with the tangible reality of the world they had just left behind. The demon Ammit waited, a creature stitched together from the very essence of the Nile's most formidable inhabitants. With the body of a lion, the head of a crocodile, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, this was no random assembly of parts. It was a deliberate, terrifying fusion of the three animals that represented the ultimate scavengers and predators of the river, the great consumers of the Egyptian landscape. Each element of Ammit was a chapter in a book of natural dangers. The lion, master of the desert's edge, could claim a body left in the open. The crocodile, lurking in the murky waters, was a swift and silent end for any who strayed too close. The hippopotamus, often perceived as a destructive force that could trample crops and capsize boats, completed this triad of power. Together, they formed a single, symbolic embodiment of total annihilation. Ammit's role was specific and chilling. If a person's heart, weighed against the feather of truth, was found heavy with wrongdoing, it was fed to this composite beast. The creature was not merely punishing the soul, it was performing the ultimate act of consumption, preventing the individual from reaching the afterlife. This was a profound personification of a very real physical fear, the natural and inevitable process of decomposition after death. To be consumed by the wild, to have one's physical form reclaimed by scavengers, was the ultimate dissolution of self. The myth of Ammit transformed this biological certainty into a divine moral judgment. It was not a random, indifferent end, but a direct consequence of one's life, a final, symbolic consumption by the very forces of nature that had surrounded them in life. This story wove the harsh realities of the natural world into the fabric of the spiritual one, creating a powerful incentive for a righteous life, all built upon the simple, observable truth of what happened to the unprotected in the wild. A mountain did not simply explode, it sprouted 3 screaming heads of fire and smoke. For the Slavic communities who lived within sight of the Carpathian ranges, the ultimate terrestrial fury was the Zimei-Goranich. This was no ordinary dragon, but a 3-headed titan whose every breath was an apocalypse. The myth is a breathtakingly precise interpretation of a volcanic eruption, breaking down the chaotic event into a comprehensible, beastly anatomy. The central, largest head of the dragon was the main volcanic vent, violently spewing a torrent of molten rock and a towering column of black ash into the sky. The 2 smaller heads flanking the central beast were the secondary vents, furiously exhaling plumes of toxic gas and superheated steam. The river of lava, crawling down the mountainside to consume everything in its path, was the creature's fiery breath made liquid. The deep, guttural rumbling that preceded the eruption and the constant tremors that shook the ground were not geological shifts, but the heavy footfalls and enraged roars of the beast as it stirred from its slumber beneath the earth. This narrative transformation served a profound psychological purpose. A volcanic eruption is an event of such immense, impersonal power that it can shatter the human spirit. But a dragon, however terrifying, is a being you can understand. It has a body you can strike, heads you can sever, and a will that can be challenged by a hero's courage. The legend of the Zimei-Goranich turned an unstoppable force of nature into an epic conflict, replacing helplessness with the possibility of victory. It was a story that acknowledged the world's capacity for raw, destructive power, but insisted that humanity, through valor and cunning, could still stand against it. A sudden, unexplained loss within a community left a void filled with fear and unanswered questions. Before the science of forensics could offer clarity, the unsettling physical transformation of a body after death was a profound and terrifying mystery. The Chinese Jiangshi, often called the hopping vampire, emerged directly from this confrontation with mortality's most basic processes. Its most defining feature, that stiff, bouncing gait, is a near-perfect personification of rigor mortis. When a body was discovered in this rigid state, it did not appear to be at rest. To an observer, it looked poised for movement, frozen in a moment of terrible tension. This visual, combined with a complete lack of understanding about why the person had passed, created a fertile ground for supernatural explanation. The logical conclusion was not a natural process, but a malevolent force that had seized control of the remains, reanimating them with a destructive purpose. The Jiangshi was not a ghost but a physical predator, a corpse animated by a trapped spirit or a wayward breath of energy known as Kai. Its stiff limbs prevented a normal walk, leading to the legendary hop, a motion that made the creature seem both comical and deeply unnerving. This myth served a crucial cultural function. It provided a framework for understanding sudden tragedies that otherwise seemed random and senseless. A death from an unseen illness or an unknown poison was no longer a meaningless event, but the work of a tangible, if spectral, agent. The story also encoded practical wisdom about handling the deceased, reinforcing the importance of proper funeral rites to ensure a peaceful transition and prevent such a dreadful transformation. The Jiangshi was a story born from the human need to find reason in the face of the unknown, transforming the natural, solemn process of decay into a narrative that made the terrifying comprehensible. A dense fog does not simply obscure the forest, it transforms it into a living riddle. From the deep Scandinavian woodlands emerged the legend of the Huldra, a being whose very nature was woven from the interplay of light, shadow, and the low-lying mist that clung to the pine trees. She was described as a woman of impossible beauty, yet her back was said to be hollow like the trunk of a long-dead tree, a hidden truth revealed only upon the most intimate encounter. This haunting image was born from the eerie atmosphere of the forest's edge. When a thick, ground-level fog rolls through a clearing, it plays tricks on the eyes. A gnarled, moss-covered stump, or the twisted silhouette of a birch tree, can easily be mistaken for a human form standing silently in the haze. The mist softens edges, blurs details, and gives the entire landscape a sense of watchful ambiguity. A solitary figure glimpsed for just a moment through this shifting veil could be a lost traveler, or it could be something else entirely, something both alluring and profoundly wrong. The Huldra perfectly personified this duality. Her beauty represented the forest's bounty, its promise of game, mushrooms, and shelter. But her hollow core was the warning, a symbol of the unknown dangers that lay within, the potential for getting hopelessly lost or encountering a predator or simply vanishing without a trace. She was the embodiment of the wilderness itself, a place that could provide for a community but could just as easily consume the unwary. The myth was a powerful cultural narrative about boundaries. It taught respect for the line between the cultivated village and the untamed wild, suggesting that the most beautiful things in nature could also be the most treacherous, and that every gift from the forest came with a hidden price. Even the purest of legends has its roots in the frozen sea. The unicorn, that symbol of grace and untamable purity, did not emerge fully formed from a poet's dream. Its most tangible piece of evidence arrived not from a mythical forest, but from the holds of Viking longships carried as rare treasure from the Arctic expanse. These were the spiraled, ivory tusks of the narwhal, a whale that lives its life in the cold, dark waters of the far north. To the medieval merchants and nobles of continental Europe, such an object was utterly inexplicable. It was too long and perfectly formed to be from any known land animal, and its beautiful, twisting spirals seemed to defy nature itself. Since no one had seen the creature it came from, the most logical conclusion was the one that fit their worldview. It must belong to a magnificent, snow-white equine that roamed distant, enchanted lands, a beast so pure it could only be captured by a virgin. This was a classic case of global trade creating a local myth. The origin of the tusk was a secret closely guarded by Norse traders, who were more than happy to let the value of their exotic goods soar on the wings of a beautiful story. The legend was further cemented by the tusk's purported magical properties. In royal courts where fear of poison was a constant shadow, a cup made from this so-called unicorn horn was believed to neutralize any toxin. This was not mere superstition, but a form of early toxicology. The porous nature of ivory could, in some cases, cause certain liquid poisons to bubble or change color, giving the appearance of the horn purifying the drink. When the cup seemed to react, it confirmed the unicorn's divine power. When it did not, the beverage was deemed safe. Thus, the myth served a very real, practical function, blending commerce, security, and spirituality into a single, enduring symbol. The unicorn stands as a testament to how a single, misunderstood object, traveling across thousands of miles from a world of ice to a world of courts and castles, could inspire one of the most persistent and beautiful legends in human history, a creature born not from nature's fury, but from its most elegant and mysterious artifacts. This shared vocabulary of myth reveals a deep truth about our own minds. The same lightning that created the Raiju in Japan could just as easily forge the Thunderbird's fiery gaze over the plains of North America. The same fossilized mammoth skull that birthed the Cyclops in Greece might have inspired tales of one-eyed giants in a dozen other lands. These parallels are not evidence of ancient communication between cultures, but of a shared human operating system. When faced with the unknown, our brains are wired to ask the same fundamental question: why? And in the absence of data, we fill the void with the most sophisticated tool we possess, the story. This narrative instinct is a cognitive bridge, allowing us to cross from confusion to comprehension, from terror to a fragile sense of control. We did not create these stories to explain away the world, but to build a relationship with it. By giving a mountain a titan's heart or a river a spirit's will, our ancestors transformed a chaotic universe into a world that could be spoken to, bargained with, and even, on occasion, challenged. These myths were our first maps charting the territories of fear and wonder, and they were drawn in a language that every human culture, in its own way, has always understood. Our journey through these 30 legendary beings reveals something far greater than a collection of tales. It uncovers the very blueprint of human understanding. Our ancestors were not merely telling stories, they were constructing the first models of the universe with the only tools available to them: keen observation, boundless imagination, and a deep, unshakable need for meaning. Every dragon born from fire and bone, every thunderbird whose wings darkened the sky, every siren whose song drifted from the shore, each one was a living hypothesis. They were early, brilliant attempts to answer the most fundamental question of all: why does the world behave this way? Science has since gifted us the physical mechanisms behind lightning strikes, fossil formations, and solar eclipses. We can chart the path of a storm and understand the decay that creates a marsh light. Yet, the myths have not lost their power. They endure as a breathtaking testament to human creativity, to our relentless drive to build a bridge between our own hearts and the vast, impersonal forces of nature. They are the legacy of our first conversations with the unknown. So the next time you feel the rumble of thunder in your chest or catch a glimpse of a strange glow on a foggy night, pause for just a moment. Remember the rich, vibrant tapestry of stories that such ordinary wonders once inspired, and listen for the echo of that ancient, shared need to find a face in the storm.